Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler, doing a series of videos here about this profoundly teachable moment. There's something very important for liberal America and the Democratic to see about the catastrophe we've just had, the unthinkable of having an American electorate after being shown all the stuff that Trump has shown. Nonetheless, electing this guy to be president, quite clearly, who knows what the scenario, quite clearly a genuine threat to dismantle constitutional order. So how can you say that this rise of fascism is um, not just something that happened, but something that was allowed to happen from the liberal side because they didn't recognize what they were up against, didn't see it for what it was, didn't even notice that it was rising. The phrase I use is a coherent force that consistently works to make the human force, which fascism is history's forms of being essentially a force of that sort, which I have said, a coherent force, etc., is a good definition of evil because it's destructive. Evil is understood to be destructive. Anyway, we've got a force of fascism like, more powerful in America than it's ever been in history. Like the slave powers be something that can, but the Supreme Court for the slave power, it's not a decision. It's the Supreme Court that had done that immunity decision saying fascism basically, the Supreme Court has occupied territory with the force of fascism. And the question might be asked, well, why is that happening at this point in American history? Yeah, well, I think most people wouldn't ask that question because tend to not look at the forces are interplaying in a complex world. We just take things as one at a time. Oh, it just happened now. That's all. I think it's not the way the world works, but it isn't always easy to see. Um, when we talk about one thing, I think is important. At least identify another, which I think is clearly important. Very much to contribute about it. That is that we have a lot of new technologies of information so that we know that oh, we're not getting their information about what's going on in the world. If anything like a reputable journalistic source. The era of people my age, born in 46, thinks of Walter Cronkite saying, it's the way it is. Remember what they say here, 26, 2024. There isn't a shared sense of reality. It's more or less assured in basically three universe, all of them reasonably honest journalistic enterprises. Cronkite, so these are names from the 50s and 60s. The Americans all basically got kindred pictures of the world, not all of us, the overwhelming majority. That's not true anymore. A lot of new information sources. So you can have something like Elon Musk, Twitter, utilizing these new technologies to advance the cause of fascism. So the way I put it, again, how to deal with this, the way I put it is all the rapidly changing information technologies, like new technologies of sort throughout history, create possibilities of disruption. All of a sudden, new things are possible, and it takes a good while before the world comes up with, if they ever do, the ways of controlling that technology and guarding against the dangers. Well, we're not well guarded against the dangers of this technology. From the 20th century, I am really going to be the one to talk about, regular legislate or further deal with to bring the technology under control. And meanwhile, fascism has been really effective in ways of utilizing this technology for its own purposes. Timothy Snyder sent something out there, what's it called? It was about a propaganda technique, phantom campaign or something like that. Sophisticated propaganda techniques that first Putin used to manipulate people and Republicans apparently are capable of doing it. It's a very clever thing, and people end up uh, getting manipulated. Called fascism, getting people who might have gotten up and voted for not to vote for her, and they won this election. So that was part of the. We've had trouble with Facebook. This is a special case, but that's one of the things that we living in a world in which the tools available to the force of the lie uh, seem to have been boosted in ways that forces of the truth either have not yet matched. Let's just put it. But the other thing that is an answer to the question, why is it happening, has to do with the rise of the secular worldview. It's a split from free thinkers, 18th century or something. Free thinkers, like somebody was involved, if they didn't basically adhere to, or at least pretend to adhere to, the orthodoxies of the religious world. Free thinker. I mean, I think that most people in the world are free thinkers in that sense. I don't have any data. It's just a portion of people in our time whose worldview is not substantially governed by religious tradition. It's much higher than it was. I would guess in the 30s and 40s, the proportions considerably different, and in the 19th century, even more. And I am of the secular view. I believe that the truth is to be had not by holy which is to what's in it and to experience its richness and meaningfulness. But to me, the task of how do you find the truth is you get evidence and you apply reason logic to it, and you draw somewhat tentatively because you want to maintain your in mind. You draw whatever conclusions the evidence supports. That's what I believe in. And I think that there another with discipline or without discipline. A substantial portion of it is more or less in that vein. I, I, in most respects, for example, that the Stokes trial where back in 27 or something in Tennessee, where a guy's being tried for teaching evolution. I mean, not everybody buys evolution with a long shot anymore. That's part of our division. And on that score, secular worldview as a way of understanding what's happening on this planet. How did we get to be where we are? And it turns out it goes back to the planet 1.5 years old. I read something last night saying that they think the living cell was 4.2 billion years. That's way earlier than that. At least 3.5. Understanding where we came from, I think it's essential. It's really a big deal. And the Garden of Eden stories, I dig them. And I've thought to why did that get written and what it all does it signify and what does it capture validly and what doesn't. I mean, I like that stuff. But we have ancestors that go back hundreds of years if you trace it far enough. And it's essential to really understanding what our situation is. That's the story. However, there are things, the secular worldview, that make it an unfinished work in progress. And in particular, as good as it is on a lot of scientific questions, the secular worldview in its current state has emerged lacking a way of dealing with what turn out to be some important realities. It just does turn out to be. And this is the subject for a coherent force that consistently works to universe. It's important to understand that. And yet, how is it to be understood? When I would wager that if you go back to previous generations where this worldview predominated in the electorate, including the democracy and against fascism, that there never would have been this failure that liberal America has had in our time. They would have seen what the was and the toxicity of Rush Limbaugh. I believe that there would have been, because they were in a religious worldview to a greater extent, there would have been an openness to the concept of there being a force of evil, because the religious tradition from the Garden of Eden onward talks about Satan, good and evil. The whole thing about goodness and evil has got to do with forbidden to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I mean, it's right there. Anybody who's operating in the Western religious tradition has got a way of understanding there's a reality out there. But the secular worldview, once you drop Satan, natural stuff, you're left with just the natural stuff. The things that you can figure out from the evidence to it. Well, in the unfinished work of the secular worldview, it seems that a whole document. I have wondered, people who right, years ago or 3,000 years ago, or whatever the traditions formed around issues of good and evil, what was the means by which they were sensing there was something there that they wanted to capture, and they captured it in supernatural terms and spiritual terms. I don't know the bigger picture. But if you leave Satan behind, which secular, how are you going to see? I said the problem with the that they did the campaign this year. The real serious problem is they did not fight this thing as it was rising over the course of 50 years. And the big reason for it was they didn't see it. They didn't see it because the secular worldview dropped Satan and had nothing to replace it with. There is a reality you could point to, which I will through future video, that allow you to see that there is a coherent force that consistently works to make the human world worse. Not just something like the Republican Party. I think that's fairly rare. I call that a pure case. Usually, any given actor, like a nation or an individual, should be seen as a mixture of constructive and destructive forces, and incorporates and the ways in which we're whole and the ways in which we're broken and how we express ourselves. It's usually a mixture, but occasionally you get something like the Republican Party. And I've actually studied two other cases of fairly pure case, and Nazi Germany, which I've been studying for life, and also the slave power that emerged in the South and gave us the national nightmare of the Civil War. And those can be looked at. One of the ways in which this one is differentiated from those other ones is the role of first thing. You got these technologies that fascism has found a way to exploit. New possibilities open up, and it's like the Wild West. There is no law, and therefore it's the gunslingers who take over, like Elon Musk. So there is a reality that I would like to present, which fleshes out that space that's missing some in secular worldview. The secular worldview that doesn't have anything to replace the devil and his minions. It's a way of envisioning what are you dealing with when something starts to arise. Like the Republican Party, it was becoming visibly in the 1990s, became even more so during W's administration with his torture memos, flying us into a war, and then eventually reaches the point where we have a Donald Trump. And you think of after he shows us all that he shows us, this force has been able to get so powerful that it can get the majority of the American people, it's like 50% anyhow, to vote for something which is about as obviously and blatantly and multidimensionally the opposite of what you should give the powers of the presidency to, as you can imagine. So we're vulnerable at this point in history from new technologies, but also I think because we need to expand the secular worldview to incorporate some realities that religions people in touch with that were in fact important, but then fell out of the worldview. A lot of people who left the religion behind and didn't have a way of conceiving important realities like good and evil. My purpose in future installments of this series, and I hope you'll follow me. I claim I can show that that is really true, that there are such realities, that they can be seen in a purely social scientific kind of way in terms of cause and effect. And so I hope you'll stick with me because we need to pay the price for the unfinishedness of the secular worldview, which ill-equipped us, apparently, if I'm right about this way of interpreting how what's happened in the last 30 years, ill-equipped us to see, fight against, and protect our nation from the rising force of this destructiveness, ugliness. Thanks. I hope I lay these things out more systematically. That's what I at this medium. This isn't as systematic as I try to be in my writings. So if you want to see how this job I can do in the craft that has been mine for since I was in my mid-teens, 78 now. So you can please go to my website, A Better Human Story.